So I've tried to explain some of the what and the how. I'd like you now to I'm going to introduce you to a few key people. The first is going to be this gentleman. Sean McMorrow was the principal of St Joseph's Primary School in Craigavon back in 2018 when we filmed him. I think he's now possibly retired. There's about 700 pupils in that school. There were 2 special needs classes, if I recollect correctly. We only met him accidentally when we went out to film some of the kids. The special needs teacher had, in the previous few months, taken a class to the local RDA centre, and you're going to hear from Sean just his reaction to seeing the kids. Now, Sean comes from an urban background, no horse experience whatsoever, and extremely sceptical.
Unbelievable. You know, I was gobsmacked by what I saw. Because, you know, I would see those children day and daily with their different needs, and there's a whole dichotomy, a whole range of needs in that room. And to see that calm and that rapport between the horse and the children, it was almost like the horses were tuned in to the children's needs. And if anyone had said to me, if someone had said this, what I'm saying to you now, if someone had said it to me, you know, a few months ago, I'd have been thinking, that boy's on medication or something. It was wacky, you know. When I drove out to Moira that day, I was thinking, I'm going to see this for a few minutes and then I'm going to have to go to Leanne quietly and say, maybe we need to knock this on the head. This is a wee bit dangerous. You know, those children are getting up on a horse, and it's quite a height. You mean, it's just an accident waiting to happen. That was my thinking. I was very sceptical. And I'm not exaggerating, within seconds, I could just see how the children were benefiting from this. As I said, that rapport between the horse and the child, the calm, it was almost like the horse was tuned in to the child's needs, and the children were just they were just loving this, you know. I've never seen them happier. I've never seen them as calm. Best thing, the best therapy that I have ever witnessed, and I, you know, I would love if we could extend this to all of the children in our school.
The next lady up is Miriam Donnan. Miriam is the principal of Mitchell House School in East Belfast. About 80 children, day pupils, ranging from pre-primary school age at 3 years old to as old as 19. And she's just going to tell you a little bit about the range of conditions that I can't adequately describe.
Yeah, so we have a wide range of physical conditions that the children have. So mainly we would have children with cerebral palsy and spina bifida, but we also have children with other conditions. We have children with brain injuries. We have children who have had amputations, limb amputations. We then have children who have developmental delay and difficulties with coordination, and we also have children who have low muscle tone and high muscle tone, and a range of muscular conditions as well as rarer genetic conditions. And
now Miriam will tell us a little bit then she goes to, these children are taken to the little group that I help to volunteer in, some very significant physical challenges. But this is what the feedback is that she sees from that session. That
core strength is so important for our children, for them to be able to do lots and lots of activities throughout their daily lives, and their coordination as well. So a lot of our children with their cerebral palsy and maybe with their brain injury have a lot of difficulties coordinating their bodies. So having that opportunity to coordinate themselves but also to respond to the horse is so important. And when they do that, that then gives them that sensation that they can use those coordination skills that they've developed through riding the horse into everyday activities in school, but also their confidence. A lot of our children have speech and language difficulties and find it really challenging to communicate with people, particularly with strangers that don't know how they generally communicate. So to allow them the opportunity to build a relationship with the volunteers and the staff who are with them for riding is so important, because they build that relationship to communicate with them, but most importantly, they know how to communicate with the horse. And that's really, really important, because they have to listen to what the horse is communicating to them and then respond. And that communication development is lovely to see, and it's so lovely whenever that you see the children ready to go on a Tuesday afternoon to riding and really excited about it and wanting to get the best from it. But they also have an aspect of learning through their sessions. So when they're looking at going to different letters and numbers within the session. That's all part of their learning that they do through school. So it's very much part of interlinking their learning with the experience of riding. And the mental health benefits, particularly for our teenagers. So a lot of our teenagers do struggle with their mental health, and that's a big challenge for children with physical disabilities and with associated learning needs as well, where they need that experience of being able to relate to animals is so important for their mental health and well-being. So our RDA sessions are physiotherapy led at present, but we also as a school get huge benefits from the children attending RDA. The benefits to the whole child are so important, and that's really important for us as a school to recognise that. I think that's so important for our staff to see the massive benefits to their well-being, their whole, outlook on life is so important for us to recognise that the impact of this doesn't just go to an hour on a Tuesday afternoon. It actually goes through the whole child, through the week, through the impact for the parents as well. That's massive to have your child coming home talking about the horse that they've been on, building that relationship with them, actually wrapping up and heading outside for an hour in the afternoon, summer and winter, and all of that is so important.
The whole child message came through no matter how much we just wanted to talk about physiotherapy or occupational therapy or riding exercises in every case. So although I've separated down into the living apparatus, the divine mirror, the outputs are not easily separated in such a way. I want to introduce you now to the Donkey Sanctuary. Lorraine Conlon is not the right name. Lorraine, whose surname I've forgotten, is the boss of the Donkey Sanctuary up here just up in Temple Patrick. And she's going to tell us a little bit about what the Donkey Sanctuary does.
We work with children who have physical needs and also children and indeed young adults and adults with maybe mental health too. We have life-limiting conditions that go through the whole broad range of the spectrum of ages. I would say probably the majority of the children that we have here, probably 70% of those children would be on the autistic spectrum to a greater or lesser degree. It's not written, nor would it be classed as being therapeutic. Yeah. What we're delivering here is donkey facilitated learning. We have different clients. Typically our day would be made up of young school children who would come in the morning times, and they come with additional needs schools of all different types, from complex physical disabilities right through to maybe speech and learning, and as well as children who are life limited too. So those sessions are set up in a very secure environment where the donkey is totally at freedom and at liberty. We have a trained facilitator, and we also have an equine specialist who is there entirely for the welfare of the donkey. We are pretty unique in that we have got a real structure and a framework to the services that we provide, and that we monitor the animal's welfare both post, pre, post and during the actual session. Donkeys don't have any problem communicating with us and all across all sorts of emotional sets, yeah. They can display stress, and it's important to us obviously that we act on that, and there's never any duress put on the animal. Part of the ethos of what we do is freedom of choice, just as from the human side of things as well as the equine. So at no point would we ever force or willing an animal into doing anything that it doesn't want to do. A lot of the I suppose the thought behind what we're about is really allowing time. So should it take 15-20 minutes, or should it take 10 or 12 weeks? It really doesn't matter. We are very lucky here and very fortunate is that we can actually allow that to happen. And I had a situation about 2 months ago, just before the schools broke up, where I had a young boy who came with the school, and the teacher and classroom assistant were, I would say, probably unconvinced as to the benefit of him being there. It was out of his routine. He was a little stressed coming off the bus. It was a brand new environment. There was new flooring, different smells. So they were quite, I would say, reluctant to look at the benefits of what was happening. And he walked over to the donkey and put hands on either side of the donkey's head and started to babble, verbalise. And the teachers had never heard him do this before. They did make the comment to me that afterwards that he didn't actually make any eye contact with any human in the area either. She'd never seen him really look at her, and he was quite clearly communicating in some way with this animal. So not only did I learn a massive amount as well about this child, and having preconceived ideas about how it's going to turn out, but they also did too. And that for me, I think was probably all the more important. That was probably the biggest learning for me. In that I hope that maybe they may have a different view of not only that child, but potentially any other children too. So.
I hear from Miriam again, sorry. I sit at the Mitchell High School. There's children there from pre-primary age, from 3 years of age. Quite often children have been premature births and have been hospitalised, obviously from birth for some time, and haven't been able to make that connection. So quite some sensory deficiencies. So she sends a small bus load up to Lorraine at the Donkey Sanctuary. This is pre-primary kids every week, and this is what she feels they get.
The benefits for those children are massive. A lot of our children haven't had the early sensory experiences that a normally developing child would have due to their physical disability, and often their associated sensory needs along with that. For some of our non-verbal children, that's a massive big step for them at a very, very young age. And I suppose that then is a stepping stone for us, and we can use that then in school for their sensory experiences. They can talk about what they've experienced with the donkeys and use that as a learning experience as well.
I said there's a free ride going on here. This is Gwen Garrett, who runs probably the most active centre, Riding for the Disabled Centre in Northern Ireland, Sonoma. They own their own premises in the grounds of the old Oma Hospital. And just a few seconds on the RDA value proposition.
We deliver a wide range of programmes to up to 80 riders a week, some weeks, with a volunteer base of about 50 for less than £20,000 a year. We
asked Gwen and there's some of her colleagues there to do a quick run around on the total volunteer hours in a typical year, and we put a very modest hourly rate to it, and it came out at somewhere between 350 and 400 grand a year. So I don't make any excuse for saying society's getting a free ride here. There's no other income coming into that, other donations into that centre. You're going to hear now from two ladies, both called Mary, both mothers of children engaged at Oma. The first one has two high-functioning autistic daughters, one of whom I believe is now finishing, or maybe has finished her law degree at Queen's, but you'll hear what their earlier life was like. The second, Mary, has a 12-year-old child prescribed with ADHD, but they're just going to explain a little bit about the experience of those children.
Well, in one fell swoop for the younger girl, I can say we went from a child who thought that life simply wasn't worth living, and said as much, who was withdrawing from life, who had stopped going out, who was agoraphobic, who stopped talking, and then ultimately the final decision, subconscious decision, she stopped eating. I came in here and I sat down and I watched what they were doing, and I thought, wow, I'm so impressed. Grace smiled and she started to talk. That was phenomenal. It is absolutely critical that places like RDA survive.
Okay, well, my name's Mary. I'm a parent to Aaron, who is a 12-year-old boy. He's been in the RDA here now for 2 years. He would be on the autism spectrum and would suffer from ADHD, which is attention deficit hyper disorder. Aaron's biggest issue would be that he has very poor concentration, and this is probably one of the first places where Aaron came and has been able to concentrate to such an extent that he has been able to compete on a national level.
If you put a child with autism on a half-ton or a ton animal, communication has got to be instant, it's got to be effective, it's specific and it's clear. I'm sorry, it's all of those things that our children with AS, they need. They get that. But they also learn how to, and they learn the cause and effect, they learn the relationship. Well, I want this to happen, therefore I have to do that.
This has given him confidence in the sense that he's been able to compete. He's learned, one, to win, and he's also learned to lose at the competition. So he's found out a lot about himself throughout the journey that he's had here. And we've been able to watch him grow in confidence as he makes friends here. And as well as that, he has been asking about when, at 14, he'll be old enough to be a volunteer here. And he wants to get interested in the mucking out and the work that's going on. So it's almost like, you know, the poacher and the gamekeeper, you know, he wants to go full circle through the RDA. So it has been a great assistance to him.
The two ladies now will go on to explain a little bit about how what was previously considered disruptive behaviour, antisocial behaviour even, has changed because of their interactions, how they learn to cope. And it's pure temple grounding stuff again. It's about what she lectures about so strongly, about change the environment, don't mollycoddle, don't wrap in cotton wool, change the environment, take out the stressors, and don't necessarily take out all the stressor. A balanced amount of challenge, and the children will learn to cope. And this is, I think, very eloquently put.
Do you know, I often think if his teachers were to come in and see him here, they would be amazed at how he concentrates here. I go to the parent-teacher meetings, and Aaron is academically a bright child, but what the teachers will say to me is, if we could nail your child to the seats, we would have a great child here. Now, don't get me wrong, they help him tremendously, but he has flies in his pants. You know, he just wants to move constantly. And yet he'll come in and he'll sit on the horse, and because he's getting that sense of movement, because he has to concentrate so much on what he's doing and listen to the instruction from whoever is giving it, or occasionally entirely on his own when he's in competition, he has to be able to do it himself. It shows the skill set that he has learned through here.
They learn how to deal with sensory challenges as well, and therefore they can deal with a very busy environment and the smells and the dirt and the noise and the lights and the instructions and the communication requirements and the temperature drops and changes. You can deal with the classroom, you can deal with the lecture theatre, you can deal with the workplace, and you can deal with people. So that's, you know, that old buzz phrase, transferable skills, that's how that works. If, at a more simpler term, which I've seen happen here, if you have to put on a pair of boots, you have to wear a hat to ride, you have to put on jodhpurs, and you have to wash, or you're going to smell of horses. Some of our kids have huge problems with those things. But they deal with it because they really want to get involved with the horses. So they learn that they will survive and that these uncomfortable sensations are not fatal. And they do them, and they do them, and they do them, and they desensitise to them, and they get through it.
Next, we were very, obviously when it comes into the psychotherapy area and dealing with kids with trauma and things, it's very difficult to ask anybody to even talk to us, never mind have a microphone and a camera present. The next gentleman was more than generous with his time. He's called Andrew. He's the father of Nathan, a 14-year-old child on the autism spectrum who, as far as I know, has always been homeschooled. He was in danger of self-harming, and it was a very heartbreaking story, but what you're going to hear is heartbreak to I suppose, to hope.
The equine therapy has had such a massive and positive impact, not just on Nathan, but in our whole family circle. His first session, he went in and said, like, I'm not going to talk. I'm not talking about emotions and how I feel. So that was the first session. Second session, he came out, got into the car and talked for a solid hour and a half, which was probably the longest conversation I'd had with him in about 5 years. It's the relationship with the animal. He feels totally at ease with the horse. He has learned how to vocalize his frustrations, how he feels, and his desires. It's the first time that I would say that I actually have a trust in a treatment that has worked, that is not drugs-based, that is not going to sedate my child, and that it's not going to leave him in an institution as an adult. He has now shown interest in a career path for himself, and he has built friendships. He has built 3 new friendships. He was able to deal with the public transport, flying, all the things that he could never cope with, the outside stimulus, being in groups. He still struggles with that, but he now has a coping strategy. And that has been the biggest, I suppose, impact that the equine therapy has had on Nathan. He now has faith in himself that he can deal with this, and he's aware that if he has a bit of a meltdown, as we call them, that he can process that and move on. It doesn't have to define him. So it's been really good. I mean, I can't actually put into words the difference that the equine therapy has given has made to Nathan. For us, my son at the moment is 14. This time 3 years ago, I didn't think he would be alive when he was 14 because I really believed that he would have taken his own life. One of the most amazing things, he came out of one of the sessions, jumped in the car and said to me, "Dad, I love life." And I have to say, I had a total moment in the car because I never thought that I would hear him say that. He just seemed to be somebody who existed before, and now he's somebody who is living life. And I think the equine therapy has given him the strength of character to take ownership of his diagnosis and to be able to go on. And I do fully believe that he will now succeed in life because of this non-invasive treatment that was offered to him. The equine therapy has made such a massive difference in ways that medication was not able to do.
Next, we're very privileged. This young man is called Dale. He's a 17-year-old foster child. He's in his third foster home now, luckily to be in that of Tanya and Mark Watson, who've been fostering for 10 years. Tanya keeps horses, she's a qualified psychotherapist, and she's not shooting me in the foot for saying she maybe stumbled in this to some extent in bringing Dale out to meet the horses. He felt he had no control over his life, and this is what he now feels he can achieve.
You walk the horse in a field, and it was down to me. While any other time I'd been with a horse, it had been very like someone else was controlling that horse. I was just there. So there's a sense of like responsibility, but it was less of like I was forcing someone to come with me, as someone wanted to be with me and be around me. And I noticed the first time I did it, I was very hesitant to do it, and I was very not like calm. To be fair, I wasn't very up for the idea, and so I went out and chatted. It was like, let's get this over and done with. And the horse planted his feet and refused. He would not take it, and so I had to be calm and then go with the horse and as like a friend, and not as trying to force him around a field so I can go back inside. It would help relate to like other things than just myself. Before going out for the equine therapy, Tanya had done small bits of like therapy just within a room, and so after I did see the benefit of it, but then when I went out for equine therapy, I then saw like 10 times that benefit in half the time, and so it turned from sitting maybe once a week for an hour, we would sit inside and talk, to once a week talking outside with a horse, and it was so much quicker. Like I got so much more like help so much quicker. I don't like thinking back to it. It was more like I always say the same simile of it's like a balloon, and like going inside, sitting inside, it's like kind of like releasing a bit of pressure, a wee bit of air, but like going outside is just stabbing the balloon, popping the balloon, everything's out. Because while I was inside, doing therapy just inside, I noticed I'd held back a lot of the things I wanted to say because maybe I was afraid to say them or whatever. But outside, whether I wanted to or not, I couldn't, which is kind of a good thing in the sense of it needs to be said. And I found myself like the first time it was very emotionally draining because I just popped and everything went everywhere, and I had no control over like being able to keep that together. And then through going again and again, I was able to then progressively kind of like shape that into my own opinion, my own thoughts, and be able to think of it logically and not just a big mess of emotion everywhere. Where my mindset right now is I would not be the person I am without that type of therapy, and like that built me up so much, and it was an amazing experience. It helped so much.
The next lady is a lady called Sheila Lavery. She was the coordinator of the TESSA project in Northern Ireland until recently. TESSA stands for Therapeutic Education and Support Services in Adoption. It deals with children from 2 to 12 years old that are in adoptive or in foster situations. And by far the most eloquent person we have met on this journey to describe the benefits of this and to be an advocate for it from a very independent position. She went looking for therapies that would work with a lifetime of experience with these traumatised kids. And this is her view on the experience.
Originally I found out about equine therapy, and what I was looking for was therapies that would kind of feel less threatening for children in a way, and not where children wouldn't have to talk about their experiences. One of the things we know about trauma is that when you start talking about things that have been traumatic in your past, it creates a physiological response in the body and actually puts children into fight or flight or freeze or submit behaviours, which is what we wanted to avoid. Also, a lot of our children would have experienced trauma when they were very young. Some of it when they were tiny babies, actually some of it when they were in the womb. If you think about traumatic experiences in the womb, which do actually impact on a child's development. And so they would have what we call developmental trauma, and they would have had it from before they had language. They would have no verbal skills to articulate it or to even understand it. They would hold the trauma in their body. So what I was looking for was ways where they would be able to express trauma physically, creatively, relationally, and not have to sit in an intense therapeutic experience and try to think about or talk about something that they had no cognitive ability to do. And we wanted the parents to be part of this. We wanted the parents to be engaged in it, and we wanted the parents to understand the benefits of it and actually reap some of those rewards themselves. I think the benefits are diverse and different for different people, different children, different families. I think they're often subtle. One of the things we know about trauma is that recovery is slow, okay? But what makes a difference, and I think one of the things that happens with equine therapy is there are moments of breakthrough, there are moments of opportunity that can let you in. These children are very defended, you know, and there are opportunities where you can get in and begin to build a relationship. It is relationship that changes people. It is relationship that changes traumatized children. Just doing that exercise where you approach the horse and the horses very clearly give you signals if they're not comfortable. Traumatized children, all people give you signals that if they're not comfortable, but we don't always see them because we're too busy listening to the words that are coming out of their mouths. And we're not reading the body language, and body language is a child's first language. It's the language they have before they have words. Whatever the therapy is, it's the relationship that holds and contains the child, and it is a relationship that is enduring when the therapy ends. So we have to get the adults to build an attuned relationship, and you can see, when we're building relationships with children, what a mother does with a new baby is have what we call a dance of attachment, where they get to know each other. And that was exactly what was happening with the horse in the arena. And it was a very clear illustration of how softly and quietly you need to move to build a relationship that will regulate the child, because one of the big challenges for our children is keeping them regulated. That will help to rewire their neurobiology so that they can overcome the trauma, or certainly manage it, and to build resilience in the child so that they can have qualities to get through life without being constantly dogged by their early life experiences. Because it's a really useful, incredibly useful service for our kids. And adopted children are the most vulnerable in society. So if it works for our kids, it'll work for other kids as well, and their parents. And their teachers. I think teachers should come and do part of their teacher training working with horses, really, because horses are these big, beautiful but quite scary animals, but they're also flight creatures, and they're just spooked at with the slightest thing. And that's a bit like our kids. Our kids can come across in schools as being quite aggressive and bulshy and difficult to work with, but you know, they fly at the slightest thing. And how you approach them, how you work with them, how you relate to them is critical. I mean, that's all evidenced by the research into trauma, by Stephen Porges' research into the polyvagal system and the social engagement system, all the Van der Kolk research, the Bruce Perry research. All that relational being with is what regulates children and helps them to develop better ways of being in the world. I'm comfortable that the research is effective. I think, like every therapy, it works well. It works brilliantly for some people. It works well for some people. It can be okay for some people, and it's just not right for some people. I think, like every therapy, it needs very clear boundaries and safety guidelines. And I think, like every therapy, the therapist makes a huge difference to how well the therapy works. I mean, the thing about equine therapy is it's a kind of a three-way, it's a triangulated relationship, isn't it? There's the therapist and the client and the horse. And what the horse does lots of things, but primarily from what I can see, what the horse does is kind of dilute the intensity of the therapeutic experience. So it doesn't feel too hard for the client. It doesn't feel like I have to give answers to this question, or I'm being pressured to say something that's too painful or difficult for me. But you need a very skillful therapist to facilitate that, you know, and to encourage, to not push too far, and to be able to step back and move forward in the dance that the client has with the horse, and to be able to encourage that reflection, to know when to put the brakes on, to know when to speed it up. You know, that there's a lot of skill there. It's not just about standing in a paddock with a horse.
One last clip, sorry, Lorraine Nelson is the lady's correct name, thank you for it. Just Lorraine, Sheila and Sean, just to sum up.
I suppose the greatest desire for me would be to have people appreciate the impact, the positive impact that it can have on people's lives. It does require people to be open-minded, and it is a journey for some people, but it is really quite simple. It is very much allowing time for people to process thoughts, to have people benefit from just being close to nature. A lot of these types of things and these very simple things people aren't getting the opportunity to do these days.
I would say to anybody who doubts this, experience it for yourself. I had a theoretical idea of what equine therapy was, and I had read some research paper, but I didn't really know what it was until I was standing there with the horse.
I found an inner calm with me when I went to the session, and it was almost spiritual. Now, that might sound a bit wacky, but it was something spiritual about it.